Hello, I'm back. Did you miss me yesterday? Probably not, because I don't think anyone's actually watching this. The yesterday I didn't post because I was completely overthinking, and I'm very good at that. And it's funny because when I overthink, I'm like, I can see my thoughts. It's like, how's this going to land? Or how do I even start? And what is someone going to hear? And what are they going to think? And it just gets you tangled up. And overthinking in of itself is not a problem. It's when you're not aware, when you're not aware that you are overthinking, that is when you get tangled up. It's like thinking without any pause, without any reflection, without any awareness that you are thinking. That is when you can take yourself down some rabbit holes. And actually, when you become aware of it, you just know to leave it alone. It doesn't matter. You just come through it. And it's a bit like, I remember describing this to someone, that it's a bit like a rock pool. And it's like stepping into a rock pool, and you create all these ripples as you step in. And then you start to judge the ripples, and you're like, oh, I don't want the ripples. I want it to be calm. I want it to be all serene and peaceful, and I've created these ripples and I don't like them. And then you start splashing around, and innocently, I love using that word, innocently, because we don't know we're doing it. We start creating more ripples, and we start creating waves on the surface. And it gets really murky, and we're like, oh God, I'm churning up all the mud. I can't even see my feet. And then someone comes along and they say, just stand still. And we're either willing to stand still or we're not. We might say, no, that's not going to work. I need to do more. What are they talking about? Stand still. But as we get more interested and we get more curious, when we stand still, then the ripples just calm down. And it's just like our thinking. When we're overthinking, we are, obviously creating a bit of chaos in our mind, and then we feel it. Our feelings are our thoughts playing out. It's like you can't plug in a negative thought and then feel great. You're going to feel what you think. I never knew that because I was so busy judging my feelings all the time. So when I got anxious, I would be judging the anxiety, or when my daughter got anxious, or I didn't realize, I didn't start looking at what I was thinking, what I was creating. I had no awareness around it. And so I'd constantly, just get lost inside it. Until one day, for whatever reason, I stood still. And I'll tell you about that later. But I began to become aware, and I had this massive shift, and everything changed. And it's like, there's this time when there was a friend, or someone I knew who asked me to go and speak to their friend who she'd had a traumatic experience in her childhood, and she was completely identifying with it, and she was lost inside it, and she had a lot of thinking around it and resistance, and she had become so overwhelmed with what she was creating, with the waves on the surface, and that she had said, the only way out is to not live anymore. I can't do this anymore. And so my friend said, will you go and talk to her? And I remember really clearly, I was just getting into the car, and my daughter came out, and I said to her, I start to think, and I was like, I feel that I don't know what I'm going to say, and I feel like this is quite a responsibility. Like, I was just in a moment, of kind of doing what I was doing yesterday, just kind of overthinking and needing to know what it was going to look like. And my daughter, in that moment, she became my teacher, and she just put her arms around me and gave me a big hug, and she said, So don't think about it then. And I don't know if she even knew what she was pointing towards in that moment. But ultimately what she was kind of saying was, you don't need to know what it's going to look like. You know, you're getting yourself tangled up while you're thinking about it, but actually you're not going to talk to them from that space, Mum. You're going to talk to them from a space that doesn't need anything. And it was funny because when I spoke to that person, she said to me, one of the things, we had a quite a light conversation, and she said to me, she said, you know, Kate, now that I have found this answer, you know, now that I've decided that I'm not going to live anymore, I found this quiet space beyond my thinking, you know, and it feels great. She said, don't take that away from me. And I said to her, I'm not going to take anything away from you, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything or not do anything, but I am going to show you what you are doing. And I'm going to ask you questions and show you that you've found what so many people are looking for. You've found this quiet space in between the thoughts, beyond your thinking, this space of awareness that is entirely different from the experience you have of life. And I said, and you're alive. And yeah, she got curious about what she was creating, and she saw beyond it. And it was interesting. I remember talking to someone who was staying with us, and he, again, I did the same thing. He was kind of lost in his experience of a disorder, that he had been, a label he'd been given, and some resistance to life, and his experience of depression. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go and talk to him. And I stood outside the door, and I was like, I started to think, and I started to be like, oh God, you know, what am I going to say? And what if he just tells me to, you know, F off? And how am I going to start this conversation? And a whole load of limited thinking that I immediately could feel. It felt heavy. There was no inspiration there. There was no connection there. And so it's not that I don't do it. It's just that I'm aware of it. And in that moment, just like in the rock pool, I can stand still. And when I stand still, I can kind of connect with this space beyond the limited stuff in my head, the self-doubt, the, you know, all the thoughts that we can recognize because they're heavy. They don't feel light. They just kind of feel, they just feel a bit rubbish. And so, yeah, I can override it. I can override my thinking because I know there's a space beyond. And I know that when I'm in that space, then someone else connects with that space too. And they get curious and they get interested and they start seeing beyond their experience because, you know, they're so, they just, because you're connecting with them beyond whatever it is that they're stuck in, beyond the anxiety or the overwhelm or the disorder or the depression, and in that space we're all the same somehow. And so yesterday I decided that, you know, for this channel, I'm just going to leave my thinking alone, and I'm just going to post every day for the next, 100 days. And it's not my responsibility to know what you're going to hear or not hear, or whether you're going to listen, or I'm just going to leave that alone and see what happens. And, you know, perhaps you can, listen as though you're listening to music, like you don't need anything from this, and just see where it takes you. And if you're here right now and you're listening to this random channel that you have found, it's just like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something here for you. And you don't know what that's going to look like, and you don't need anything from it. You just come on the journey and you see where it takes you. And I'm just going to just describe kind of everyday experiences, often when I get lost in the shit show of life, and when I'm seeing beyond, you know, the learning that I see when I catastrophize or when I overthink or when I react. And it's not about, you know, anesthetizing yourself to life. It's about seeing, becoming aware of what you're doing all the time, bringing something kind of unconscious to a more conscious level. And it changes you. It changes everything. It changes. And so, yeah, maybe you're up for that ride. Or maybe you'll say, that's not enough. She's not fixing anything. She's not telling me anything. She's not giving me tools. She's not, you know, this is not enough, in which case you won't listen. And that's okay too. But it's funny because I remember having a really distinct thought when my daughter started to struggle and a lot of people were trying to give me coping mechanisms. And I remember thinking, why would she cope with life? Like, why would that be enough? Like, I want her to live life, not coping, not kind of struggling through life, but to live and see beyond her fear and see beyond her experience and just, yeah, live life moment to moment, not coping, living. It's different. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.